3, 2, 1, and we are recording. My name is Nancy Van Rees, Metro Council member representing District 8 and the chair of the LGBTQ Caucus. There are 5 members of the caucus, 3 are present, so we're going to go ahead and start this meeting. I'm going to do a quick screen share to show the agenda for today, courtesy of our Secretary, Mr. Bradford. Thank you very much, Russ, for that. Everybody can see it? Okay. First thing we have is just the approval of the minutes from July the 17th. Did Brett or Russ, did you see anything that needed to be changed since distributing that? Okay. With that, I move that we accept those minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There you go. That was easy. Today on our topics of discussion, we have first on the agenda a conversation on some pending legislation, a bullying bill, an ordinance amending Title II, the Metro Code of Laws to prohibit bullying in metropolitan government services, activities, programs, and facilities. And I am going to go ahead and share that document as well. This had already been approved through the council office. There it is. By all 5 of us. But I wanted to make sure that as a matter of due diligence, we open any discussion that there may be have about this before it's officially filed for our next meeting. I wanted to make note that Spirit Day is always in October as well. I guess October the 15th is Spirit Day. And in the past, Mr. Withers has done some resolutions, I believe, regarding that as well. But I think that it's nice to be able to talk about this publicly during the month of October. So there was one point that we wanted to make. I think that our early draft of this resolution mainly spoke to youth and bullying. And Mr. Withers brought it to our attention that there's a lot of people that are bullied that are not youth. So Brett, if you want to speak on that a little bit, then please do.
Just kind of welcome any thoughts on that. I will take another look at the legislation, but yeah, I mean, folks of all ages can be bullied and discriminated against. So certainly youth are sometimes the most vulnerable, but elderly people can be bullied too. So we just want to be, when we're being inclusive, be as inclusive as we can and capture as many people as we can. So welcome any changes if anyone has thoughts on that.
So does the current ordinance already contain the updated language to include other groups, or are we talking about adding that?
I believe this is the most recent where it says any person as opposed to youth. We can make sure that's the intent. Hannah Zeitlin from the council office in her due diligence indicated that the legislation may conflict with state law, which limits anti-discrimination measures that local governments can take. And they gave us that statute. Attorney John Cooper said that he didn't think that there would be a conflict, but there may be a conflict. I can't imagine it coming back to us as having been conflicting, but we wanted to make sure and mention that as well. The definition of discriminatory practices, I will read the Tennessee Code. No local government shall by ordinance, resolution, or any other means impose on or make applicable to any person an anti-discrimination practice, standard, definition, or provision that shall deviate from, modify, supplement, add to, change, or vary in any manner from the definition of discriminatory practices. Mr. Colby, if you could make sure I'm mute. Thank you, Councilmember.
Okay.
Do that for you. There you go. There you go. Okay. The definition of discriminatory practices or deviate from, modify, supplement, add to, change, or vary any term used in such definition and also as defined in such section, or other types of discrimination recognized by state law, but only to the extent recognized by the state. Any such practice, standard, definition, or provision imposed or made applicable to any person by a local government prior to the 23rd of May 2011 shall be null and void. This was the Tennessee annotation 751-1802 that Attorney Cooper acknowledged that the ordinance that we are passing against bullying may or may not be seen as an attempt to go against this particular statute. That's not the intent. We don't think it is. The mayor's office, Mr. Brandon Marshall from the mayor's office, in fact, worked with us on this language. And so we have the support of the administration for this, this initiative as well. So
I personally don't see any potential issues because we're not calling out discrimination based on all those factors. I feel like this is generic enough. We shouldn't trigger anything like that.
That was equally my impression. And with that, I wanted to, because we had already said that all 5 of us were signing it, it's kind of like officially have this conversation to let folks know that it's something that we were doing. And also that because it being Spirit Day, I will throw that up to, oops, I'll screenshot on that. Spirit Day is October the 15th. Where millions of youth around the world go purple on Spirit Day to stand against bullying in support of LGBTQ youth. And we've had Mr. Withers, you were very kind enough to help us with a letter to the editor for the blood donation conversation that we were able to have. If you're at all inclined, if you'd like to write a draft for us to explain why we think that anti-bullying is important during the month of October, and to acknowledge Spirit Day and the youth that will be participating, and then mentioning how people of all ages and types are bullied against, and this legislation that we're bringing forward. Is that something that you feel like is, number one, do we feel like that's appropriate? And number two, would you be interested in writing that?
Yeah, absolutely. The legislation that we have, what's the calendar for that?
I keep muting myself. I told the office that it would be filed for the first meeting in October, but we could make it the second if we wanted to.
No, actually, I mean, I think it's usually better if we're doing legislation to do it before an event than after. So I think that's perfect. And I will see what I can come up with for that. Appreciate that.
Fantastic.
And before we're done with legislation, while we have some of our guests with us, there's a comment I would like to make, but I'll save it for the end of the legislation piece, if that's okay.
Sure. We haven't seen Mr. Young. I haven't heard from him as to any delay that he's had. I know that we should be seeing Councilmember Benedict here fairly shortly, but as I said, with that particular pending legislation having already been approved through the council office, I think that we can just proceed with the next thing on the agenda. I think that's good. We don't have to vote on it. We've already said that we'd sign it. The next thing is our current legislation on the renaming of Fifth Avenue to Representative John Lewis Way.
Councilmember Van Rees,
Yes.
before we go to that, will you ask Hannah to send that legislation to the Minority Caucus? I think that, after reading it, I think that it's something that we should very much sign on, because I know that there's bullying for many of our, Latino brothers and sisters. And I'd like for us to show some solidarity with the LGBTQ caucus and the great things that you all do. And knowing that we've got several members of the caucus in that Southeast community, it would really, I think it'll speak send a good message, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to do that. And we will have that passed around as early as Monday so that that you guys can make sure that we get as many signatures on it.
Right, and Councilman Withers, while the young folk call it bullying, the adults call it hazing. So I think you're absolutely right on that. And we miss it, and you think about a lot of the fraternities and sororities where we've had, fatalities as a result of it. And people just take on that attitude and don't even realize that they carry it out throughout their daily lives.
That's right. Well, and to continue that solidarity, we wanted to, in kind, I believe that everyone is in pretty full agreement after a unanimous confirmation on our vote last Tuesday for the project on the renaming of Fifth Avenue to Representative John Lewis Way. But I wanted to give this opportunity for us to visually collaborate on this, because Mr. Lewis was a big part of the LGBTQ community as well. And we wanted to, as a caucus, co-sign along with the Minority Caucus on this, if appropriate. We agreed to do that here at this meeting. So I know that Chair Hurt, you have done a lot of work on this, as well as Ms. Zolvat, and I would love to hear from either of you as to the current status and how we may otherwise be helpful.
Thank you so very much. I'm going to defer to Councilwoman Suara and allow her to speak on it. She's done a fantastic job as it relates to this. And I will then come back and ask your support on the renaming of Hadley Park, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Go right ahead.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? And I see that my name is showing as Brett. And that's fine. That's fine. So thank you all for having us. And I think it means a lot that the LGBTQ caucus is willing to sign on to this legislation. I think it's, from everything that I've seen since we started, there's a lot of support for this project. Almost everyone said we need to honor Congressman John Lewis. I think you have some variation in where, when, and how. But even those variations are very minor. But to date, we've had support from businesses along Fifth Avenue. Like I shared at council, um, there is a trail from the beginning of Fifth Avenue to the end of it that is connected to Congressman John Lewis from Jefferson to the Nashville City Cemetery, Ryman, the Freedom Rider, the buses, Woolworth, obviously. And so there is a way to honor him by making sure that stretch of the streets uh, um, is a reminder of all that he did. Um, there is a couple of people wanted us to name some other places like Jefferson Street, and people wonder why Fifth Avenue. We as a caucus agree that we don't want any polarizing naming, and we don't think it's good that every time we want to name something after an African American legend, it's only the African American community that should do it, or we should only be in the African American corridor. And so with all this connection to faith, it makes a lot of sense. I don't know if many of you know this. Congressman John Lewis actually did receive an award on the stage of the Ryman Auditorium, and that award was presented by the late Dr. Martin Luther King. And so when the Ryman and the Country Music Hall of Fame heard about this project, they were so in support that they decided that there is a portion of Fifth Avenue that is called Opry Place, and it was officially named Opry Place a while back, that they decided to rename Opry Place John Lewis Way. And that is how much we've got American Baptists, we've got a whole lot of people on it. So I will say that one of the things that we've had to change since we started, like you remember, is that we are stopping at Jefferson Street. It's a good bookend from where we'll start to where we're going to end. We're hoping that once this is done, we'll have a match from Jefferson to the city cemetery and stopping at Woolworth. And a whole lot of things is also being planned along with the celebration. Now, I will be submitting an amendment on second reading to change the effective date to 1st of January. And that's so that we can avoid any conflict with any elections. It's also a good place for businesses that wants to change with the Secretary of State. They can do with their annual report. It also goes in time for them to do with their tax return. Now, something that is of use that I found out in this project is that when we do a street change, people don't have to contact the post office. It will be done automatically. People don't have to change any document other than their driver's license. And people have a whole year to make the change. The post office, the city will honor your address for a complete year. So businesses don't have to feel like as soon as we change it, they have to start changing their stationaries and everything. They don't. They can use their old stationery. It will still be honored until January of 2022. And I think it's important to put that information out there so that we want the process to be streamlined and easy for everyone. But like I said, this is something that a whole lot of people agree to. And I think it's an honor for us to be able to acknowledge all that Congressman John Lewis has done, and to also know that he got his start, whatever it is that he's known for today, he actually got it because he came to Nashville. If he did not come to school in Nashville, he would not have had the opportunity to had the training with Reverend Lawson or to be part of the city and everything else that is come known for actually started here. And so I'm hoping that the caucus will sign on, caucus members will sign on, and I hope that you can also help us be advocate for it. If you have ideas on what the celebration could look like, people are talking about mural, people are talking about a trail, a whole lot of things that we can do along the corridor. If you know businesses that are on there, encourage them to support it. We've not had any pushback, and I'm hoping it stays like that because everyone realized that this is something we want to do and we want to find a way to bring us all together. I hope it stays like that. But continue to be advocate for it, continue to support it, and definitely please sign on to the legislation and support it also on the council. So if you have any question, I know I've given you a whole lot. I've been talking about it for so long and answering so many questions that I try to anticipate some of the things that people have been asking me that could be of concern so that people can know that the committee is very intentional in making sure that we address all those concerns. We're not just going right along. I thank the Minority Caucus for allowing me to lead the project and also my committee members and now the LGBT Caucus for the support.
Thank you so much. I can speak to my experience in changing names of streets, that it takes Google longer than everybody to change it. But something as significant as this, they may get to it even faster. So as people are searching for things, that's always the last thing that people are frustrated by, because the tracking, people are trying to put in addresses and that kind of thing. So it's a process, but eventually it does work itself out. I think that a lot of people outside of the LGBTQ community may not realize what a hero Representative Lewis was to us as well. I sent you both a little bit of information about that. Representative John Lewis was known for his work in the civil rights movement, but Lewis was also a staunch and early defender of LGBTQ rights, having co-sponsored more than a dozen bills through his career as a lawmaker to protect and advance the rights of LGBTQ people. Among those bills was the Equality Act, which prohibits discrimination based on gender identity, sexuality, and he was a lead sponsor to that. He also worked to repeal DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, and was a real hero to us as well as a community. And I think that any way that as you put together these celebrations and these conversations, that we as a caucus, and you've got Mr. Woolley here actually on the call as well, but the LGBTQ Caucus, Nashville Pride, will want to find ways to help participate in that, because he was a hero to us on a number of other levels as well. So that's why I wanted to kind of just put a spotlight on that through the venue that we have here for this meeting, and welcome any additional comments from my colleagues.
I just want to add, I think it's a good thing with your amendment pushing it back. You said it would push it back to February. Well, that would also coincide with Black History Month. And so I almost see you request for ideas of how we could celebrate the renaming. I almost see a march down the newly named Representative John Lewis Way to commemorate not only the start of Black History Month, but the changing of the name. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and that's already discussed. Actually, the committee talked about why don't we actually arrange a march from Jefferson Street all the way to the Nashville City Cemetery. So that's already been discussed. We just need to, hopefully we'll get all this done. The effective date will be January, but we can do the celebration in February. Why not? And that will tie to Black History Month. I think that's a great, I didn't think about that, but that's a good suggestion. You put it all in there. Also, one of our guests in one of our Zoom meeting is Professor Gloria McIsaac, who is actually one of the members that participated in that sit-ins. She's also an historian, and she does tours. She's part of the civil rights organization here. And she said she will be willing to actually organize tours down Fifth Avenue. We're also thinking about putting markers along the way, not necessarily historical markers, but different things that as you're doing the tour, you can actually point to places on the road of what has happened. There's a conversation about the art community doing a mural because of Fifth Avenue and the arts, doing a mural as part of the celebration. Somebody talked about a statue that they want to do. So there's a whole lot, like I told everyone, I've had people say, why not do a park? No, we could do so many things. This is a good start. And what makes Fifth Avenue make so much sense is all the places that it touches along the way. It's also not just for residents, but also tourists. People that are going to the Predators game, to the Sounds game, to the Ryman Auditorium will be able to see this and what the late congressman did in Nashville. And it's a celebration of all of that and a great reminder for all of us of what we have to continue to fight for. So yes, this is a start. It's a good start, but we can still build. We can build a lot around it.
You just brought something up. Fifth and Broad now, becomes really John Lewis and Way and Broad. And the African American Music
Museum, yes,
address
yes.
will be on Representative John Lewis Way. Is that accurate?
I'm not sure if the address
no,
is
it's
that.
not.
No, yeah.
I do
The
know. I know for sure because I
Yeah.
helped them try to get it changed. They wanted the Broadway address
Okay.
because Fifth Avenue wasn't, it wasn't hip then. But now that it is, but they worked so hard, it is going to be Broadway address.
But there will be a door. They have a side to Fifth
Yes,
Avenue.
it will be.
Which is good.
Fantastic.
Another way that you also think about this is that Cordell Hall is also on Fifth Avenue.
Yeah.
And so, and Senator Gilmore has already talked to the state's general operations or whatever it is. And so that will be John Lewis Way as well. And so I think it's going to be very symbolic in so many ways. It's not just an ordinary street, and there's so many lessons along the way and so many things that we can do with it. So I'm excited and I'm counting on all of us to get it done.
Well, I know there's another intent of one of the colleagues I believe she's still on her way, but I would like to propose that we agree as a caucus to sign on to this ordinance. Yeah, it's an ordinance as a caucus for all five of us to instruct the clerk's office to add all 5 signatures as a caucus to this. Is there any discussion about that from you guys?
I believe I've already signed on to it, but I'd be happy to make a motion for us as a caucus to sign on.
And what I would say is that if Councilmember Suara is bringing forward a substitute, we need to re-sign on to the substitute.
I learned that too.
Getting all the way to the end and my name's not on it.
And I was like, which one is it? Exactly.
The good news is that I'll be having an amendment to change this. So not a substitute, but I did learn that too, that one of the bills that I was co-sponsoring got substituted and I got dropped. So that was a good lesson for all of us. But yes, we will be doing an amendment just to change the effective date at the second reading.
That's all good. Well, with that, we do need to have a vote on that since there are 2 members not present. We are deciding that for them. So if all those in favor of signing on as a caucus for this legislation as amended, all those in favor?
Aye.
Right. So you guys can anticipate me sending a note to the clerk's office, to the council, to make sure that all 5 of our names are bundled onto that. And feel free to share that as is appropriate as you speak to those that are collaborating with you on the process. Cool.
I believe that Councilmember Hurt wants to say something also.
Yes, with that, I understand, Ms. Hurt, you have something else that you'd like to discuss from the
Yes.
Minority Caucus?
Yes. Well, first, let me say that my favorite part about the Representative John R. Lewis Way is that it intersects with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. and being that he was his inspiration and met him to actually get him involved in the civil rights movement, I think it's just absolutely perfect. So likewise, throughout all of the movement that we're seeing going on right now, there was a young man who had previously recommended changing the name of Hatley Park. And he specifically said he wanted it to be named a Malcolm X. And of course, the park did not approve of approve of that recommendation. And this has been a couple of years ago, but the idea and the intention behind it was justified, valid, and well intended. Um, but now that the things have gone on over the past 6 months, the timing has presented itself for us to revisit such. So I recommended to Hadley Park, and the Minority Caucus also recommended that the renaming of Hadley Park, because as Councilwoman Suarez says, is that people are always saying, well, we need to name something after John Lewis or Diane Nash or the Freedom Riders or these people and that person. And we don't have enough parks and enough buildings and all of that. And there's a stipulation to streets that you have to be deceased. But we decided that Nashville Freedom Riders, the organization itself and who they were, is no longer. So it would be appropriate to do that. One of the things is that people were concerned about is that Hadley Park, we're not sure if it was named after its slave owner or if it was named after a doctor who was here in Nashville. But either way, we compromised and said, well, let's name the park after the Nashville Freedom Riders, and the community center will still bear the name of Hadley Park. It is very befitting. The Nashville Freedom Riders has not really had any real true celebration, even though they all did get honorary degrees from Tennessee State. That was pretty a controversial decision, and because of it, it kind of took away some of the luster that I know many of them had, and those that I know that are still alive don't use the name or the title of doctor, even though they do have the honorary degree. But we do have a small mural on Jefferson Street that we did some years ago in honor of the Freedom Riders, and we thinking that this would be a very befitting, and knowing that that community has changed. As a matter of fact, when no, it was MTSU had a heritage conference many years, well, not many, but about 12 years ago, and and the first workshop that was sold out was the one about Jefferson Street. And when the people came, they were very disappointed because they didn't see any reflection of the magnificent history that Jefferson Street had. So that's what prompted me to do the Heritage Plaza that you see, the Gateway to Heritage that's there, and the plaza, and all of the historical pillars that are there, focusing on history from 28th Avenue to Rosa Parks, speaking of the Black Nashville history. I think that with Hadley Park, and I don't know if you all know, but this was designated as the first city park for African Americans in the country. So being that it does have that tie to the Black community, it's very fitting. And, we want to give people their roses while they live. And while we do still have many of the Freedom Riders alive, this would be a great honor for them. And
Thank you.
and we just appreciate your support in our efforts to rename it.
I appreciate you sharing that with us. I know that through some of the work I'm doing as well, and as the Parks Chair Committee, that the Parks Board, I believe, is reviewing it, and then it's going to come back, and it'll actually be given the thumbs up or thumbs down by the Parks Board. It won't actually come before the Metro Council, but that all the more reason for the council to to say something on their own that of what a great idea this is, because there won't be that bully pulpit to be able to say it on the council level. So I really appreciate that, and as you know, we'll continue to reach out to you as the Parks Chair in any way that we can amplify that as well. Thank you both for joining us. You're more than welcome to stick around, but we're going to go ahead and go to the next thing on the agenda. Excuse me. It's so good to see you guys. Have an awesome.
Thank you, guys. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we had Mr. Sledge on at one point. Hopefully he will be coming back to us. I don't see him. I'm going to give him a chance to rejoin us and skip over that and move on to the next item on the agenda if there's no objection, since Andreas is here with us. Community updates include Community Oversight Board updates. We wanted to hear from Mr. Martinez as to what's happening with the Community Oversight Board. And we had, as a caucus, to remind folks back in January and March, and agreed that we wanted to hear from the COB as it was continued to kind of get its sea legs, if you will, to make sure that the LGBTQ community was receiving all of the benefits and resources of the board. And so I want to just introduce you to Mr. Martinez if you don't know him yet, and you can let us know a little bit more about you, your perspective, where you are as it relates as a representative of the COB, and what updates you have to share with us.
Thank you, Councilmember Van Rees. I think the only one I haven't met in person is Councilmember Bradford, and Councilmember Withers, you're my council member. So thank you so much for inviting me. I think it's important that, I think it's great that the LGBT Caucus is hosting the COB, and now the COB has its second LGBTQ chair. So that's pretty exciting as well. I am just a month shy of my tenure as chair of the COB, so it's been a lot to absorb in the past few weeks. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about everything that we've done so far, everything that's going on. First, I want to thank you guys for voting for the ordinance that supported our subpoena power from Metro Council. It's important that we have that, especially if it comes to a situation where there's some surveillance video from a private entity, private business that requires a subpoena for us to obtain in order to investigate some allegation of police misconduct. It's very important for us to have, and it's something that we had at the beginning. It's something that the people of Nashville voted for, but something that the state took away just a few months after we were formed. So thank you so much for that. One request I have related to that is to look into how specifically we should go about the process of requesting the subpoena. So I assume the board would vote to request a subpoena from council, but then who should we give that request to, and once it's actually, or who issues it, and then once it's actually issued, how is it enforceable? Those are the questions that we have now that it's passed. I guess we just want to make sure that when the time comes that the process runs as smoothly as possible. I think that probably is a question for the Metro Council attorney, but I'll pose it to you as well. My colleagues at the COB continue to negotiate a new memorandum of understanding with the MNPD. So I think it's not a secret that we've had a lot of trouble over the past almost 2 years in accessing the documents and records that we need in order to conduct the investigations that we were created to conduct. But I'm hopeful now that given the change in leadership, that we're going to get somewhere, and hopefully really fast. Interim Chief Drake did show up, or call in to our last COB monthly meeting a month ago, and expressed his support for the COB and the work that we do. So I'm really hopeful that the current discussions will end in a really positive way in the next couple of weeks. One thing we wanted to explore is ways that MNCO, Metro Nashville Community Oversight, can work collaboratively with MNPD's LGBTQ liaison. In the sense that, you know, if the LGBTQ liaison is receiving complaints about police officer behavior or officer misconduct, I think that the COB should be aware of that, so we could, you know, examine recurring issues and see if there are, you know, policy proposals, policy changes that we can propose to MNPD so that we can stop those issues from reoccurring. I think we need more outreach probably from the LGBTQ liaison at the MNPD, just like MNCO needs to conduct a lot of community outreach so the community is aware that this person exists and what that person, what their role is, what they're charged to do for MNPD and for the community. And then one last thing is that MNCO is convinced that we should be giving more or, you know, putting more resources into mental health care, mental health resources for different types of calls that police may receive. I was told about a call, the SWAT call out that MNCO got as well to a person that was suicidal and barricaded. Obviously, SWAT isn't the, you know, first thing you want to call, the first thing you want to see in that situation. I think there needs to be more, a more reasonable approach to these situations, especially involving someone experiencing mental health issues, because that's a mental health issue, right? And then to invite you all to call in on Monday. We've been hosting a series of town halls at, well, virtually on WebEx, and me, or Dr. Marissa Richmond and I, in her role as MHRC chair, board chair, we are hosting, exactly, thank you, the next community town hall. This is the third one, and we are specifically asking to hear from the LGBTQ communities. So if you could spread the word on this, we'd appreciate it. The last two have gone actually quite well. I wasn't sure what to expect, given that it's just via teleconference, but we've had a lot of people call in, just a lot of interest, and it's been really good to hear everyone's perspective.
That's fantastic. It was like cue. I had it queued up to share later, so that's fantastic. I'm particularly interested in this, and I know that, excuse me, Joan mowed the lawn today, so I'm like all crouchy. When I went to go find out how to log in or put it on my calendar, it was a little hard to get to. So I wanted to make sure that people recognize the MNCO-Nashville.com is the place to go to where you can find those direct links. I was trying to find it through the government calendar, and it's just like, as you know, sort of cumbersome. But there is a way to do that. But then even if you can't make it, I believe that these meetings are going to be streamed anyway, and so you'll be able to have a way to revisit it on video afterward, if that's correct. So that's good. And I also wanted to give you an opportunity. I know that you and I had a little bit of conversation regarding doing our best to get more trans representation on community boards that relate directly with you guys. And we've had some reasonable and good, I think, response to that. Do you want to speak to that, Andreas?
Sure. So initially, well, the Policing Policy commission that the mayor created. You know, it was a very big body. Our former board chair, Ms. Davis, was concerned that there was no trans representation on the commission. So she had advocated for the mayor to add someone from the trans community to the commission. Ultimately, I think we've settled on hopefully bringing in someone who can speak to that experience to kind of give their, give their testimony, give their experience to the committee. I think it's the community committee, but I hope to all committees, because there's one community, especially here in Nashville. I mean, there was one incident where several officers got in trouble, reprimanded for speaking badly about a trans person online. So there's definitely something that I hope we all can, take into account and prioritize going forward, is the trans representation in terms of law enforcement here, because it's definitely needed, and it's definitely something that we're missing.
That's fantastic. Did either one of you have any questions for Mr. Martinez?
I was just going to make a statement. It's something that Mr. Martinez brought up, his desire to see more changes with the whole social services, mental health aspect of MNPD. And it's funny he brings that up today, because I had a phone call today with Ari Schwartz from Local Progress to get more information about how some cities, mainly Denver and Portland, have started kind of switching roles and using more of that social services, mental health services to answer some of these 911 calls. So it's something I'm going to be looking into and reaching out to other members of our Nashville Local Progress group to see, and with our Metro Social Services, to see how much they think it would cost, what ways we can begin organizing this, if there's funds already allocated to MNPD for social services that could be reused for this program. From my conversation today, some of these cities, for one van to do one neighborhood is like $500,000 for one unit, basically. So a lot of these cities are doing pilots, and we're still kind of getting more information, but I'm glad that you brought that up, because it is something I'm curious about myself, and looking into how we can try to do better with our mental health cause. And by doing this, it should, take jobs off the backs of our police and let them get back to what they're supposed to be doing, and actually put social services and mental health employees in the right spot to actually help and provide those services on these calls.
If I can follow up on that as well. I mean, it's my understanding at least from the East Precinct, that they are trying to do some work with Mental Health Cooperative, which doesn't necessarily add a lot of cost. It's an agency that's already in town, but they are trying to at least make referrals to folks in those cases. And so that may be something that the community oversight can, I'd just be interested in hearing what y'all's thoughts are, or for the committee, about how that is working, how that can be encouraged. If it is working, how we can get more of that. But one thing as well that I wanted just to see if you have any initial thoughts about is with the new mental health unit at the downtown center that just opened with the sheriff. Have y'all had any discussions with the sheriff and with the booking department about how that can potentially work with diversion to some of those mental health care beds?
We haven't, not yet, and we haven't had many conversations with the sheriff, as we've been pretty occupied with MNPD. But it is something that I would definitely want to bring up to them. I know that the mental health court here or people who have received treatment through the mental health facilities in the jail. Police officers can see that if they're responding to a call in order to be more prepared. But I haven't looked into that yet.
of course, it's a brand new facility, and we're still working it out. But I think it's a good resource that if we're all across the different agencies and departments, if we all keep that in mind, I think we have an opportunity to really make that really successful if we're all intentional about that. So appreciate you looking into that.
Yeah, I will.
Agreed. And just to throw it out there, Sheriff Hall is a very big proponent of mental health and trying to ensure that we don't have repeat offenders. So I'm sure he'd be happy to provide information to help on his end.
Great, thank you.
What you might not know, Andres, is that my wife works on the National Suicide Prevention Hotline and the crisis line through Family and Children's Services. Of course, that national hotline also goes through NAMI and through Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network. There's 2 or 3 ways somebody from Davidson County, might catch somebody. But whenever there's a situation on the phone with a suicidal person, they always ask, do you have a weapon? And what if they say they do? I know that mobile crisis is then feels like they need to have police come with them, right? So understanding kind of what those procedures are, and what and how that works to where the first thing the person in crisis sees is not the blue light, but the crisis help. The police are there to help the social worker, not to enforce some sort of infraction. So working with those providers of those services also, I think, would be something that would be helpful to you. I know that the women's facility, domestic violence facility, and different groups helping with domestic violence have similar situations, and that is not exclusively heterosexual in nature. And so we want to make sure that anybody that we're working with is receiving the appropriate training to understand the diversity of what a crisis can look like. So anything that we can do as an LGBTQ caucus to amplify or facilitate discussion, then we want to be a resource to you to do that. So that we are grateful for your service to our city, and very, very happy to see you as the chair. I know that it makes me feel better knowing that you are there, and I'm sure there's several people in our community that would love to tell you that. So we're going to tell you that for them. So thanks for doing that. We also want to challenge each other in this public forum to remind ourselves that we did add to the application form for boards and commissions self-identification opportunity. We've seen 2 check the affirmative, 3 actually, 1 by, I think, an ally. It's sort of a weird check, but 2 to check the affirmative, and it helps to be counted, but we do need more applications. And so no matter where we are in the community, if we find somebody that is qualified and willing to serve on a board or commission that is LGBT or Q, that we have them reach out to their council member and ask them to encourage the mayor's office for that appointment and to come to the caucus for assistance if they have any questions about it. So thank you for that. If there's no other questions for COB, then we'll cut Andres out so that he can have a beautiful weekend. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
One of the things, guys, that he mentioned, about we're so lucky or fortunate, I guess I shouldn't lucky, fortunate to have liaisons in the police and fire department. And we might want to look in future caucus meetings to invite them to come as well. I think that might be an appropriate thing to do. I don't know why we hadn't thought of that, but we can do that. So going back to the pending legislation, we have the Honorable Mr. Colby Sledge on the line. I thank you so much, Colby, for coming back to us. I appreciate you joining us. If you can, turn on your camera so we can see your face and hopefully your baby too. I know that Miss Benedict, it looks like she's not going to be able to join the conversation after all, but I know that she was instrumental, as well as Mr. Bradford, in bringing up the idea of renaming, hey there, buddy, renaming a road to Bianca Page Boulevard. And so we wanted to, both roads that were suggested are in Colby Sledge's district. And so we wanted to hear from Colby about where he is with the review of those two streets and kind of just get an update from you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for considering this legislation and bringing it and wanting to do that. I think a big part of the legislation was that these are the two roads that are right by tracks. And so we are in the process now of having Inslee reviewed by the Historic Commission. Tim Walker told me that there have been several name change requests for roads across the county. So this one's going to be about third in line right now, which means it's probably going to be about 6 weeks till we have the preliminary kind of where does the name come from, what's any historic significance, if at all. And then based on what they find there, we'll see if that's the best place or if we need to try to see if they can do Kearney as well. Inslee is the better location in my mind because of the frontage. For those who are unfamiliar, Kearney is the little connecting street, basically between 4th and Inslee. I did preliminary research on Inslee because in this area, most streets are named either after two things. One, people who were involved in railroads or family members of Captain John Raines. And it turns out this might be the former. It might be somebody who was involved with the Nashville, with the old L&N railroad line. Nothing that I saw in preliminary research indicated it was anything that was just sort of like flashing lights. Oh, this is somebody who we all know. So gonna wait for that historic research, but that's kind of where we are right now.
That's fantastic. I think that for the listening public, Brett, would you like to explain who Bianca Page was and why in the world the caucus would want to change the name of a street to honor Bianca Page?
Oh gosh, I mean, Bianca Page was a legendary entertainer, personality, and real early advocate for HIV/AIDS awareness in Nashville early on, and kind of jump-started a lot of the early fundraising activities for relief for persons affected by HIV and AIDS, which that was in the gay community in particular, because we were so affected by that. As is so often the case, it was the drag queens that came out to save us, right? So and do the fundraising and the awareness. So that was Bianca Page. This is long before there was RuPaul's Drag Race. It was not quite as all over television like it is today. But Bianca passed away, oh gosh, I want to say 10 years ago. I'm showing my age now. But we, at that time, we sort of created a thing called Bianca Page Day. Back long ago, I was part of the Gay Rodeo Association here. So we had always worked with Bianca to do fundraising activities and some of the other subgroups, I guess you would call it, within our community. And we still continue that. We actually just had a resolution that was, or proclamation that was given just a couple weeks ago as well to continue to honor that legacy. There is a Bianca Page Awareness Network, which was kind of like a 501c3 that Bianca created, which still exists, I think, as a foundation. And so there still is fundraising that goes on with regard to that. But a Bianca Page performance was not one that anyone ever forgot. So, so it's, but at the same time, that was about 10 years ago. So it's really good to have some sort of a way to continue that legacy and have people continue that. So I appreciate Councilmember Sledge considering bringing this legislation.
That's fantastic. It was a great overview, and I always remind people that before Brett Withers wore bow ties, he wore straw cowboy hats, and the mustache is completely different in that situation. Because that's how I met you. You were involved with the gay radio, so it was pretty cool. I appreciate you, Mr. Sledge, coming out on this beautiful evening and giving us an update on that. As you know, as soon as you need our support, you will have it, and Lord knows it'll be a nice party that happens whenever that street sign goes up. So thank you so very much, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Y'all too, and hope to have updates soon.
Fantastic. The only other thing on our agenda was an update from Mr. Joe Woolley, who's been very patient listening to all of this conversation, but he had requested, great background, he had requested to give us an update and talk to us a little bit about how the caucus might be helpful in the next couple of months. Joe, take it away.
Hey guys, thanks. Yeah, it's been interesting. Thanks on the background. Not great lighting, but thanks for having me. Just on some things that were discussed tonight, we continue to send the mayor's office recommendations for boards and commissions. We've sent over 15 now to Ashley Warrington in the mayor's office, who oversees boards and commissions. And I think they have filled 8 with recommendations that we've sent them. So it's very good. And we're happy to copy the caucus on that and let you all know that we've sent those in. But it was an early thing that the administration did, reaching out to us, asking us for boards and commission slots for the LGBT community. We will be promoting the town hall as well on Monday for the police oversight community town hall. I wanted to come and talk to you all about the CARES Act funds that were released 2 Fridays ago now. I guess it's been 2 weeks. Kind of was a surprise when the release came out. It was a resolution stipulating where the funds were going. I reached out to the mayor's office the following week. I thought I was going to have a conversation with him that Tuesday about that issue right after Labor Day. And we ended up talking about the referendum at length. And the chamber plans to play a pretty big role in pushing that back. And I'm sure council members are going to be involved in it as well, because it is drastic what it does to our city if it were to pass. And we spoke about that, but at the end I brought up the CARES funds that had been released, and he told me to talk with Mary Jo Wiggins in finance. And I did that, but I also then reached out to some of you to update you kind of on where we were. And as a caucus, I just wanted to come to you with an update of what I found out so far. Our concern was those funds were distributed to organizations that were listed in a community survey that the Equity Alliance was in charge of creating and distributing. I reached out early on asking that LGBT be included in that, and I never heard back, but I had a real concern that LGBT was not included in that, because it was talking about marginalized communities, minority communities having fair access to CARES funds, asking them where they get their services, their small business relief programs, their entrepreneurial programs, where they go for business relief. And if you're not in that survey, then you weren't listed in the results from that. And so there was a correlation to being in that survey and getting those funds. All of the organizations that are getting funds do incredible work, but we here at the chamber are also doing some incredible work regarding COVID relief. And I was concerned that we weren't reaching a population of minority businesses. And it just brought up, I've brought this all up with Mary Jo, and I'm bringing it up with the CARES funds committee, hopefully soon, to discuss this. But I think it's just important that for the LGBT caucus to know of this and to keep pushing that when we talk about equity, when we talk about diversity, that we need to be thinking big picture diversity, big umbrella that includes LGBT. And I have this conversation a lot. We had it with the Minority Business Council when Mayor Briley had that going on. And I sat at a table, and I know my privilege. I see my face. I'm a white cisgender man, but I represent over 40 Black LGBT business owners in our chamber. They are the marginalized of the marginalized. They come to us for assistance. We are their chamber. We talk a lot, I know I've spoken with all of you, about the LGBT community being the most diverse community there is. Every race, every creed, color, they all encompass the LGBT community. And we need to think about that. And we need to be, the LGBT needs to be included when we're talking about equity and diversity. And this is a perfect example of where we were not listed. And because we were not listed, we aren't given specific attention, specific funding, and specific relief. We will continue to work, and we will work with all of those organizations that are getting funding to make sure that our members and the community at large are connected to those relief programs that they will be running with CARES dollars. But again, the larger message here is we need to have this conversation about equity. We need to make sure that we're at the table, so to speak, when we're talking about it, and that, you know, I'm working as hard as I can to find Black and Hispanic and all the other diverse LGBT groups so I can step up and then step back and have them talk about the marginalized of the marginalized and the marginalization that they face on multiple fronts. And we'll continue to work on that and do that. And that's when it can really connect. But this is just a great example of what happens when you're not directly involved or you're not at the table, so to speak. It's also a great example of why we need a diversity and inclusion officer in the mayor's office and in Metro, you know, serving that role for Metro at large, but in the mayor's office. I spoke to the mayor directly that this position, this needs to happen when I had a few minutes with him a couple weeks ago. And anything you all can do to push this, the fastest we ever moved with Metro policy was when we had someone dedicated to the work that we were doing, an LGBT liaison and a diversity and inclusion officer that can take the policy and implement it into actions across Metro. You all do a great job, but it's not your job. You're council members. We need someone in the administration and in Metro. I hope to be able to come back with you soon and update you on possible extra funds. We're also talking with, I think I told you the last time I was with you all, we did receive, thank you for approving the Mendez budget, and we did receive the $25,000 with the other minority chambers. The other minority chambers have turned down those $25,000 funds, so there's $75,000 in funds that are there. We have spoken to finance. We want to work with the minority chambers on why they didn't take it. We do have the capacity to, so we do represent all other minorities as well within our chamber. So is there a way to share the work with those other chambers? We have the programs going where we're certifying. So what we do is we certify an LGBT business nationally. We don't do the certification. The national organization does, the same as the other minority certifications. And what we have already set up and what we do is then take those certified businesses, register them with Metro, and then give them information on how to take advantage of minority contracting. We get the different contracts out in front of them, and we help build that database so that every contractor that does work with Metro has a place to go and work on getting their 30% diversity spend. We have that in place. So is there a way to help the other minority chambers do that work if that's the reason they have turned down those funds. So it's also opened another door possibly for some work there for us.
Thank you. Thank you for that comprehensive overview and some of the things that we all need to continue to be mindful of. I know that some of the way in which those CARES funds are coming through the committee, the council members that have been assigned the committee have ended up having to file late filed resolutions that we don't have oxygen to be able to even hardly like, well, that looks good, as opposed to what was left out. There just hasn't been sufficient bandwidth, and in the future, we should charge all of us with being more mindful of reading not just what's there, but what's not there. And so that's a real good reminder to do that. And I know that any systemic situation with the Equity Alliance and going back to them and saying, hey, you do another one of these, please, let's fix this for next time, I think would be a great next step for you to do inside your own thing. We have really only one other, thank you, Joe. We only have one other thing on
Thank you guys.
On the agenda, and that is really just kind of scheduling our next meeting, even if it's tentative. And the tree planting, we heard from the National Tree Foundation that they're still willing to plant the tree at the right time and in the right way. We had tentatively said it was going to be October the 5th, back a million years ago. And so what I am proposing is that we just sort of pause that. It's not an emergency. If you guys feel like that's okay, and that we could just bring this up as to resetting the date sometime later in the autumn or in the spring to be able to do that correctly. I think the idea was that we would do it right before a council meeting, but we're not meeting at the public square, so that becomes a bit more cumbersome. So, moving that doesn't seem to affect anybody. So,
Councilmember Van Rees, do they have the tree already? Like, did they order the tree?
He indicated that they can have the tree at any moment that they need it.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure we didn't have a tree sitting somewhere that was uprooted or ready to regrow.
If anytime between now and March, he said we can make it happen. So that old adage, the best time to plant a tree is yesterday, and I'd like it to be rooted by next summer. It's going to be something that maybe we can do in November instead of October, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
So if that's okay with the two of you, I'll just kind of circle back on if we're going to get back in the chambers in November, then we'll do it then, that kind of thing. Just sort of keep it pending, if that's okay. On that next meeting, we've been kind of going every other month. So if you guys want to just put a placeholder in November the 20th, which is the Friday before the Thanksgiving week. Thanksgiving is the 26th. That's 2 months, kind of skip a month. Is that okay? I mean, we can change it, but
it's fine with me.
Okay.
Hang on, what?
Friday.
Did you say it was November the 20th?
Yeah.
Well, that actually ties into the item that I wanted to just touch on briefly, but that is that November the 20th is Transgender Day for Remembrance, and I typically do a resolution.
Yes.
That's one of two that I usually do, and so obviously, this year I would want to, on behalf of we have a little bit of a template that we use. A lot of times I work with GLAAD to get whatever the statistics were for the past year, and typically update that. But what I would like to do is to perhaps schedule to work with the Minority Caucus this year, because a lot of times transgender stuff really impacts transgender folks of color. So to try to work with them for any special language that they might like to add this year, given just everything that's happened this year in 2020. But that actually might be, if we were to get that on a calendar before that, then perhaps we could, if we were going to do a meeting on the 20th itself, that might be an opportunity to work with the transgender community specifically on that day as well.
Oh, that's
just might be an opportunity.
Yeah. Well, what's better to bump it up to the 13th to get it away if there's going to be an event that evening or something, or should we?
Well, let me perhaps reach out to them and see what they. I think that's good to pencil it in for that date. For right now, we can always certainly send an email to reschedule. But I think that it'd be a really good day to have something. I mean, even if it's virtual, we could have our meeting coincide with someone else too, if they're doing something that particular day.
Does that sound okay to you, Russ? Mr. Bradford? Okay. If there's nothing else, I think we got through this with just a little over an hour. Thank you very much. I don't know what happened to our colleagues, but I'm sure that they'll watch this and get caught up. And if you guys have anything on the in-between, let me know. I did receive this notice from Councilmember Bradford that 2020 can get worse, and that Ruth Bader Ginsburg has passed away. And I know that we'll be mourning that, but at the same time, using it in the way that she would want us to, which is to get out the vote. And so with that, I appreciate you both very much. And I ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. Is that okay with you, Brett? All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys. Nothing like an efficient three-person meeting. Thank you very much. I appreciate you all. And please get some time outside and love the ones that you love very well. Adios.
Bye.
Bye.